My name is Dr. Margaret McGladrey, and I'm an assistant professor of mental health law and policy at the University of South Florida in the College of Behavioral and Community Sciences. I specialize in participatory health research and community engagement processes to amplify the voices of those not often heard in public discourse through partnerships with a wide variety of public and private agencies, from performing arts education nonprofit organizations to county jails. My personal experience with anorexia as a teen and young adult and challenges with addiction and mental health faced by family members and friends inspire my work. This documentary includes representative de-identified components of the Photovoice project conducted with USF faculty, staff, and students in partnership with the This Is My Brave 2013 live show. My Voices of Behavioral Health lab members will be highlighting the contributions of the Photovoice participants in the groups for which they served as note takers and analysts to protect the confidentiality of participants and allow them to share their voices without disclosing their personal identities. Sophia, could you introduce yourself?
My name is Sophia Reyes Ochoa, and I am a Voices of Behavioral Health Lab member and analyst, and I will be representing the voices of Photovoice participants who are current faculty and staff.
And my name is Kalia Schuler. I am a Voices Behavioral Health Lab member as well and an analyst representing the voices of Photovoice participants who are all former students and current staff members as well.
Photovoice is a participatory action research method that engages community stakeholders to photograph areas of strength and concern related to a health issue, and then critically analyze in focus group discussion how and why the health concern persists in their community toward the goal of co-identifying opportunities for change and health improvement. As you see here on the slides, there are three primary goals of Photovoice. First, to reflect and record community health strengths and concerns using photography as a documentary strategy. Second, to promote critical dialogue and knowledge about important issues through large and small group discussions and photographs. And then finally, to reach decision makers and encourage the adoption of health promoting policies with the photo and discussion combinations. For the Brave Takes project, in conjunction with This Is My Brave 2013 show on the USF campus, we're applying the Photovoice method to bring stories of mental illness and addiction into focus and to the attention of our campus community. The mission of Brave Takes is to empower USF students, as well as faculty and staff, to share their personal stories of recovery and visions for change while controlling their level of disclosure of their identity in public. Using the Photovoice method during the pandemic, I developed an approach for facilitating Photovoice groups online for the NIH-funded Healing Communities Study Kentucky opioid overdose reduction effort. In this approach that I also used for the USF project, each group participates in an online orientation session covering the ethics of photography, reviewing information about why the study is being conducted, and explaining the goals of the Photovoice method. Using the nominal group technique during orientation, each group generates lists of the topics most important to photograph related to the project's specific community health strengths and challenges. For Brave Takes, we asked faculty, staff, and students to consider supports and challenges related to mental health and addiction in the USF campus community. Participants then take photos on nominated topics between sessions. When they come back together, they not only share their photographs and any captions they may have written about them, but also discuss the prevalence of the topics they illustrated with their photos, why the realities captured in their photos exist, and what should be done and who should be involved in any action. Between sessions, Voices of Behavioral Health lab members like Sophia and Kalia conduct rapid analysis of photo discussion notes using the socio-ecological framework and identify key themes arising from each photo discussion. These analyses are presented and discussed at subsequent sessions as a reflective exercise. A final analysis and action planning session entails reviewing photos, analyzing quotes from photo discussion transcripts, and inciting those quotes to photos, which you will see at the end of this video. Each group also brainstorms a list of ideas for action needed on campus in light of what they learned in their Photovoice project. During our orientation session with participants, we talk about important topics related to the ethics of photography. For example, the theory of frame analysis from Irving Goffman, which states that how something is presented to viewers, called the frame, influences the choices people make about how to process the issue. So in other words, frames tell viewers about how to think about the issue by foregrounding different elements of our in real life experiences and keeping other elements of that experience in the background. When you think about looking through the frame of perhaps a smartphone camera or any other aperture of a camera, you can think about what is included in that frame and what is excluded, and the power that a photographer has in determining how viewers are going to see and process what's happening in reality. So, of course, in that way, framing is a form of power because the photographer is able to take a look at what is happening in real life and apply their own frame to it. So that requires, with that amount of power, a great amount of responsibility. But it also empowers those who might not normally be able to be heard to help decision makers and those in power to see things from their perspective. So that power cuts in both ways. So during our orientation session with participants, we also cover some of the ethics of photography around when and how consent is needed to take photos of publicly recognizable folks in different kinds of settings. So taking a photo example of Rhea Law, our president, while she's giving a talk on campus, wouldn't need a consent form to be completed because that's a public figure, or if you're taking photos of people in groups so that individuals aren't recognizable. We also talk about ways to take photos that are de-identified in creative fashion so that those de-identifying kind of ethics become an opportunity for more creative artistic representations. So we always tell our participants that documentary photos are welcome, that are seeking to directly represent what's happening in their lived experience, but they can also be very creative and metaphorical with their photos. And then we also give different kinds of guidelines around personal safety and consideration of the ethics of photography in terms of whether the photo could be problematic if seen by others or could potentially harm the reputation or safety of others. We give participants this form that you see here on the slide that if they are deciding to take identifying photos of people, that they're requesting this written consent that they provide back to us. And then we provide some different examples of creative ways that previous Photovoice participants have used de-identified photos. With this example that you see from my Healing Communities study participants, the circle of folks involved with a recovery group, very powerful image of 6 people joining together to combat stigma, fear, and the lack of belonging. And it also has this metaphorical kind of component with the circle that's formed by these 6 people coming together. We provide an example like this of a community awareness exhibit with the pinwheels representing children whose parents have used substances and have gotten involved with the child welfare system as a result in a courthouse area here to show another way to take de-identified but very impactful photos of a community. And then another example of a photo that is de-identified but really evocative of a specific situation that we see here is actually 2 photos juxtaposed with each other, with one person banging on the door looking to get help, the other turning away from that door and looking away from that person's need. Finally, during our orientation session, we cover different elements of confidentiality. So the ways that participants could have chosen to be part of the live show that you're going to be seeing more about later in this video. And then we also tell them this information you see at the bottom of the slide. That your information will be added to the information from other people taking part in the Brave Takes Photovoice project, so no one will know who you are. The team will do everything we can to make sure what you say in the Photovoice groups is kept confidential. However, we cannot promise that other participants in the focus groups will keep what you say to themselves. The team would like to remind participants to respect the privacy of your fellow participants and not repeat what is said in the focus group to others. And then finally, before we get into our conversation and the 4 different sessions that constitute the Photovoice project, we go through these ethics for group conversation. Points like confidentiality or the Vegas rule, what's said here stays here. The encouragement to share your story, not others, and speak from firsthand experiences, not making assumptions or attributions of motivation to other people. Suspending judgment of what other people bring into the Zoom room and their conversation. And then an invitation to step up, step back. So step up is for those who may find themselves being more introverted, talking less in a focus group conversation, to step up and maybe take the microphone when you have something to say. For step back, that's for folks like me who obviously like to talk a lot, and to invite them to create opportunities for other people to be the speakers and to be active listeners. So it's really encouragement to self-reflection in the focus group conversations. The last thing that we do during the orientation session with our participants is to brainstorm a list of the topics that they want to photograph with their Photovoice project, given our goals of understanding supports and concerns around mental health and addiction on the USF campus. So with the nominal group technique, what we do is ask participants to respond to the 2 questions you see on the screen. The first question is related to strengths and supports. Second question related to concerns and challenges. So with the nominal group technique, I ask folks to respond to each of the questions. They write down in their own personal space with a few moments of quiet, some ideas that they've brainstormed in response to that question. And then we round robin and share out different items that the participants have on their list. So what you're going to be hearing from Sophia and Kalia are examples of some of the responses that participants in their groups gave to these 2 questions. So let's start with the first one. What are the most important kinds of activities and connections that support the mental health and well-being of the USF campus community? What help is most important for members in the campus community who are in recovery? So let's start off with Kalia. What supports did participants in your group have on their list? What are some examples?
Some people brought up support animals, petting zoos, and therapy dogs that could help build connections and community for people who are more introverted, and not just during like the finals time. There was only one on-call therapy dog on campus, and going to support group or counseling can be very hard for more introverted people. And it came up that staff should have more opportunities to go out to lunch and do other non-work activities in order to boost their morale in the department and relax together, to have low-key, low-stress opportunities to get to know each other outside the classroom as well as the office.
Thanks, Kalia. Those are some great examples of what came out of your group's conversations around supports. Sophia, what were some of the examples of supports and strengths that came out from your group's brainstorm?
So my group was saying that we need time to do non-school related things while in the campus environment. So I believe that they would support the idea of having support animals, petting zoos, and therapy dogs as a way to connect to the campus as part of the community, and not just as a student or as a faculty or staff member, not just in a work environment. They were also saying that we really need to remember that we are real whole people, and that work or school are only a part of who we are. We don't have to play the character of faculty or student 100% of the time, because that's only one version of us. And they were saying that we also really need to be able to teach and make classes online, or take classes online or from home, to help with accessibility, because that also helps with self-care, self-regulation, and reducing overwhelm for people with mental health conditions, such as, like, for example, social anxiety. They might, it might be too overwhelming for them to be in a class in person. So having the option to take it online sometimes, or 100% of the time, would help a lot.
Great, Sophia. Thank you for sharing those supports and strengths and ideas that came out of the group conversation around this first prompt. So let's move on to the second prompt. What are the most challenging things that get in the way of the mental health and well-being of the USF campus community? What are the biggest concerns facing members of the campus community in recovery? So in our orientation session, participants would have some time to do some free writing and brainstorming on their own. Sophia and Kalia will again share some examples of what came out of their group's conversations in response to the brainstorm on our second prompt here. Kalia, what did you have on your list from your participants in terms of concerns and challenges?
For sure that some found that it was really hard to find resources when you are overwhelmed with financial stress and school responsibilities, all while dealing with crisis on your own. Stigma or negative attitudes about mental health conditions keep people from disclosing their own problems and their own needs. For example, if a staff member were to share their problems with colleagues and leadership, then it could be seen as unprofessional. There are different resources to support students compared with faculty and staff. So I had a faculty member that did say that she felt very unloved as staff compared with her past experience as a student. It's very important to remember that faculty and staff are still humans, and they both have feelings, and they both are experiencing probably the same things.
Yeah, that's so powerful, Kalia, and kind of relates to what Sophia's group was saying about the different character roles that we play as faculty, staff, and students, and some of the challenges, whereas we're switching roles, especially when resources change based on whether you're faculty or a student or something like that. So Sophia, what did your group have to say in terms of this prompt about concerns and challenges?
Well, as you said, there's a lot of overlap with what they were saying before. So I think they would agree, especially on that last point about feeling very unloved, that sort of unequal kind of treatment, I guess, toward student as faculty, or at least that difference in treatment. They also mentioned that there's a lot of stress with managing schoolwork, career planning, life plans, and their high workload demands as well. Balancing and giving time to different aspects of our life and formal education, in stress and time management, and what to do when experiencing a panic attack would be very helpful. On that note, they also said that there's a need for more trauma-informed policies in dealing with student mental health. So for example, better outreach using accessibility or disability services, or training on what to do when students disclose mental health issues. They believed that it would help faculty and staff help students on a human level, because of what they were saying before about they aren't just, we don't have to play the character of just faculty or just student, and realizing that they are whole humans. Well, obviously their human side is connected to their academic performance, so being able to help them as humans would help faculty and staff support students a lot better. They also mentioned the need for safe spaces for students, where students can go when experiencing a crisis. So for example, libraries are safe zones for people experiencing threats.
Thank you both so much. What powerful insights from our participants in the Photovoice project. So after this final aspect of the orientation session, what happened is that all of the participants went and took photos. So what you're going to see next with this video is an example of what Sophia and Kalia did when they were replicating what it's like to go out and take photos on campus of the topics that they just generated and discussed with our nominal group technique.
Hello, my name is Kalia and I'm with the Brave Takes project. I decided to do this photo voice with my professor on the USF St. Pete campus just because of how serene it feels. When you go up, I took photos by the staircase a lot, just on the road to mental health. It feels like it's not talked about a lot. There's a lot of stigma surrounding it, and I feel like it's very important to speak about it. You know, the staircase to me, it feels like it kind of goes nowhere sometimes. It just, with the mental health wellness here, it's just, I feel like they say a lot, but it's not a lot done. And, you know, getting accommodations for certain things, it's just a whirlwind of frustration. You know, I had at one point an appointment at September and I wasn't able to be seen until February. And it messes your mental up even more sometimes, just because of the stress that you have with classes, with work, with your daily responsibilities. And it's just, sometimes it can be overwhelming and just like you're looking for help, but it's actually causing you to want more help outside of this and just take your stresses somewhere else. So I do think that there are things that they could do better in order to make mental health and mental health awareness more together, more, I guess you could say, just complete and available. I think availability is a really big thing here, because there's a lot of students. We have 3 campuses, and staff and students are all people. We all need these types of resources, and the stigma behind it kind of brushes it under the rug. And I don't think that that's very fair. I think there should be more open discussion on mental health, because it will definitely get better if we start talking about it. I took a picture of a staircase that led to an exit, and it brings you into a space where it's just like, why did I just even come here? Why did I even go through this? Why did I even come up these stairs? I'm trying to get somewhere, and it's just, that's the wrong side. That's the exit. Then I was able to find another staircase that led to, it was kind of like a writing on the windows that led to the dining hall center, where it did have a message out for self-care and dance classes and just trying to get the community together. So I do think that those things, as soon as you walk up to a spot, you take the stairs and you see that type of message, and it makes you feel like it is inclusive, that people do care, and that whether it's students, whether it's faculty, that people are there. You just have to find them. When you're taking the stairs to a spot on campus, it's just like, you have to remember that everyone uses these stairs, that faculty, staff, professors, students, even just friends of students, everyone is a human being, and they all have the same feelings, they all have the same blood, they all need to have the right to feel like they can express themselves, whether they're staff, whether they're students, it doesn't matter. The stigma behind it is what's kind of ruining it. It makes people feel like, oh, well, we should pay more attention to the students, or we should pay more attention to what we can offer or say that we can offer instead of what we're actually offering. And I think that that's really important to kind of just pay attention on it. My name is Kalia, and this is my Brave Takes.
Hi, my name is Sophia. I'm part of the USF Photovoice Brave Takes project. I've been brainstorming a lot about the prompts that we were giving at the orientation session about what would help my mental health and what wouldn't help my mental health. I was walking around campus to see if I could get any inspiration. The first thing that I went to was the water. I love the water. I've always loved the water. And I think it's really awesome that at this campus, at least, we have it right in the back of the campus. We have it right there. I could study right next to it. I can go there whenever I'm feeling like I need to recharge. And it's super nice. I get a lot of inspiration when I go there. And for some reason, it's always quiet. Doesn't matter who's there. It's always relatively really quiet. Another thing that I did notice while walking around campus, while there are a lot of signs, posters, and everything, I feel like there aren't enough signs that point to mental health resources. And I hadn't really paid attention to that much before, but after having talked in the orientation about a few brainstorming topics, I realized that I don't really know I know where the Wellness Center is, but I don't know everything the Wellness Center has to offer, and I really wish that there was more signage towards that. I have met people that don't even know that there is a Wellness Center. I think it would be really useful to have signage just pointing to where it is, pointing out its existence, everything. Maybe somewhere we can pull out information about what they have to offer. And throughout campus, I found somebody sleeping on a hammock, and it just had me thinking about the need that we have for just taking some time to be in nature, because the hammock was it was kind of embedded in a bunch of trees and just greenery. And I thought it was super nice and super cool. It looked so relaxing. The person wasn't even moving. It was great. And I feel like there's a lot of need for that, to just take a break from the grind culture. Because lately I've been feeling just a lot of pressure to give my 100% and just be absolutely perfect in absolutely every single aspect of my life. And that kind of includes the workspace, school space, everything. I think that there's a lot of emphasis on productivity, but there isn't enough emphasis on the regenerative aspect that allows us to be that productive. So I thought that was really nice. Seeing the hammock and everything, I thought I would take a picture and take it to the next session to be able to talk about that exactly, the need to just take a break, because usually even in naps, I feel like there's a lot of shame that around taking a nap. At least in our culture and other cultures, you can just go and take a siesta. That's normal. Places shut down at a certain time and you can take your break. Here it's not as common. Here there's actually, it's sort of, oh, you shouldn't be sleeping, you should be working. So I thought it was really nice to see somebody taking time out of their day sort of for self-care, to regenerate, to recharge for the next productive time. I also saw a bunch of posters around campus. I thought that was so nice, and I think we need a lot more of those. I saw a nice collage that was just framed. I think it was titled like the African American journey, something like that. And I think that that's so nice. It's really nice to have posters that promote diversity and welcome diversity and point those things out to people. I think it opens up areas for discussions. I think it helps students feel more welcomed, more accepted in the area, in the university. And I think that's really, really important for students and for faculty, because a lot of students in this political climate that we're experiencing right now, I feel like a lot of people are kind of scared to fully express themselves in a way. I think it's really hard for people to come out and say, oh, I'm part of the LGBTQ community. Oh, I'm from this culture, I'm from this place. There's a lot of bias around that. There's a lot of sort of negative emotions and negative ideas and thoughts and assumptions towards different cultures and different groups that are just unnecessary. And I think that spreading awareness of the true journey of each of these groups is what really will help unite us and actually heal and sort of contribute to that regenerative aspect that I was talking about with the hammocks and everything. If we don't have that unity, if we don't have that acceptance, if we don't have that aspect of regeneration, how can we expect people to be productive? I'm Sophia, and these were my brave takes.
After our photo voicers go out on campus and their communities to take photos based on the conversation that we had during orientation using the nominal group technique, we come together for our first photo discussion session, which starts off with a show and tell. So what we do there is that the research analysts like Kalia and Sophia receive photos and initial captions that were developed by participants and put them together into a PowerPoint slideshow. So Kalia is going to share an example of the initial photo and a quote combination or caption combination from one of her participants.
Everyone says that it's important to take care of your mental health. They hand you a pile of resources for you to review and then send you on your way. It's not as easy as calling up and making an appointment. One by one, you go through the list and are turned away time and again, mainly because the office is at full capacity. From there, it's slim pickings because the remaining offices don't take your insurance, but you make too much to qualify for sliding scale fees. You have no choice but to pay full price if you want to be seen. With the cost of living rising, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They refer you somewhere more affordable, but the first available appointment is 4 months out with no other options. You take what you can get and wait. When you finally sit down and finish telling your story, the therapist sympathizes with you and commends you for your strength, though, through so much adversity, but your problems are too complex and your needs are beyond my expertise. They can't help you here, but are quick to reassure you that they'll help you get the treatment you need. They send you home with another packet of resources. The list of phone numbers is identical to the first, and just like that, you're back at square one.
Here's another example of a photo and caption combination that one of Kalia's participants presented as part of their show and tell.
I used to walk through these doors as a student, greeted by the warm glow of the hallway lights. Relief would wash over me, passing by the posters with words of healing validation. Empathy for my pain, sympathy for my plight. Here I would find respite, a safe place to lay down the crushing weights of my stress and anxiety. These doors are now locked. The lights have gone cold and the halls feel threatening. It's not that I'm not welcome. There's just simply no room for me.
So devastatingly powerful. These are the doors to the USF Counseling Center on the Tampa campus. Now, Sophia is going to share some examples of the photo and caption submissions that she received after participants went around their campus and communities in response to the nominal group technique topics that they generated during orientation. So these are the photos and captions that they submitted for their show and tell in our first discussion. Take it away, Sophia.
This was taken at a local park called Moccasin Park. This is an area with benches facing a small paved stage in the center for shows and get-togethers. It seemed unused for a long time with spider webs in all the seats. I saw this and thought of how wonderful it would be for get-togethers with peers and colleagues. But seeing it alone like this reminds me of how isolating it can feel without the opportunity to spend time with others. A main theme in our sessions is the need for more opportunities for students and employees to come together outside work tasks so we can build connections and create a true sense of community. Finding this area makes me think how we can use the outdoors to connect with others while spending time in nature.
Here's another example of the photo and caption submissions from Sophia's group.
This is a collage of art and inspiration around offices in the CBCS. I wanted to find inspirational images in my building. Usually I walk right by these without noticing, but today I wanted to mindfully see and take them in. I was also able to meet the people who put these pieces up near the offices, which provided me with my own sense of connection. A lot of these images capture issues that impact collective mental health. Their presence demonstrates support for marginalized people and a focus on caring for one another. Human connection is a key part of the human experience. We need it to thrive.
So in the Photovoice method, after participants share their images and captions during this show and tell process that you got a little bit of a taste of from Sophia and Kalia, then we have conversation about what those big topics are that surfaced from the photo and caption show and tell. So the way that we do that is that we talk about 3 different prompts, and we have these conversations about both the strengths and about the concerns. And so you'll hear some examples of what our participants actually said during these conversations about what the photos and the captions mean for us. So the first prompt that we talked about is, how common are the different kinds of strengths and concerns that we saw illustrated in the photo and quote combinations? So that's the first prompt. Second, we talked about why we see these different kinds of concerns and strengths. What's the causal factors? What are the driving whys behind the reasons we're seeing these concerns and strengths? And then finally, we'll talk about what the participants had to say about what we can do to address these issues and who should be at the table to make change. So let's start off and hear a little bit from what our participants had to say in response to the first prompt, which was, how common are the different strengths and concerns that we see illustrated in our photo and quote combinations? Sophia, could you share some of what one of your participants said in response to this first prompt?
Yes, so I do think that nature is universally healing for humans. Just from an evolutionary standpoint, we're literally designed to be outside, to be in nature. It's only been in the last few hundred years that we've been so indoors. In terms of accessibility, though, I wonder how accessible it truly is to do that. But something I noticed when I was walking around on campus, it was near buildings that offer services to the community. There were several people in wheelchairs. There was an older woman with a cane And I wonder how accessible walking far or traveling kind of long distances around campus is to folks who have mobility issues. And then I have to bring up parking on campus. Parking is a nightmare. I mean, it's difficult, right? And it's difficult for me, and I have that pass that lets me go anywhere, which is expensive. I don't know if having the pass that lets you park close to these resources is necessarily accessible for everyone. I know students who could not afford a $300 parking pass if their life depended on it. I have students who can't afford their textbooks. So I do appreciate that these opportunities on campus are there, but I definitely see some barriers in terms of physical mobility and accessibility, and then the parking situation and how much that costs, and just the location of parking lots to these kinds of resources as well.
Thanks, Sophia. Kalia, could you share what one of your participants had to say in response to how common are the strengths and concerns that we are illustrating in our photos and captions?
So for mine, it was once I graduated, I learned just how difficult things are as an adult. My first place of employment was terrible after graduation at USF. I broke down in front of my boss and he said, "Why can't you just be happy? I suffer from stuff too, but you just got to pray to God." Do not drag religion into this, please. My boss was very rough around the edges, and I don't think he realized how much his words actually hurt. Sometimes the people you work with are not very understanding, or it's just ignorance, willed ignorance, because they just don't want to see or recognize, or they will just make fun of you. It feels cold. It is so damaging how some people in the workforce talk to you without any regard to what you might be going through. I was yelled at, and I ended up breaking down, and I tried to explain I had a condition, and he rolled his eyes and sighed loudly. Made me feel like I had overshared. As a student, I didn't realize how great the counseling center was and how lucky I was. And I complained about the limitations, but now it's different.
Wow, Kalia, what you all are sharing really shows how important it is to have the conversation around the photos and captions to really unpack their meaning and what we're going to do about it. Sophia, could you share a last example of how one of your participants answered the question of how common are the concerns and strengths we see in the photos? Sophia's going to share a final example from how her participants responded to the question of how common are these strengths and concerns that we see illustrated in our photos and captions among people like you on campus.
Yes, so everything is focused around our jobs and how much we can produce, how much we can make, how much we can do, as opposed to just existing as biological animal beings. And it's so insane to me that we've gotten to a place where our objectified self is at the forefront. That's what's important. What do we have to do to get our work done? If we don't sleep because we have a paper due, that's just the expectation, right? Of course we're going to miss sleep. Of course I'm going to wake up at 3 a.m. to finish grading the work that I didn't do the night before. I'm expected, and my colleagues are expected, to put work ahead of family. Me and a few colleagues, we have young kids, and it doesn't matter, right? Like, if my kid is sick today, it doesn't matter. I still have to get my work done. Even though if you take a step back and you think, well, there's a sick baby, and the mother probably should be taking care of that sick baby. But that doesn't matter, because in this kind of production-oriented grind culture, it's more important that I make sure that my work gets done than it is to spend time with my family.
Our next prompt was to ask our participants to reflect a little bit on the reasons why we see these different concerns and strengths illustrated in the photos. So what are those root causes, those causal factors and reasons for some of those strengths and concerns that we're seeing? And we'll share some example responses to this prompt from each of the group members. Kalia, should go ahead and share what one of your participants had to say.
Your parents passed down a bag of trauma to you, and if you can relieve that load, even by a little bit, you can lighten the load of what you pass down to your children, and it's still something. Seeing how my parents were raised, they had seen a lot of horrific and awful things. I know that I carry some of the trauma from my parents, but they did the best that they could so that they wouldn't pass down the entire bag of trauma to us. Sometimes with the children, we don't really know how to help them emotionally, and it's frustrating because that's when you actually see it. And I do the best that I can to utilize the tools I learned at therapy to pass them on to the kids. teaching them breathing exercises and that it is okay to have big emotions. Think about those words always and should and never, and trying to see the gray instead of the black and white, getting into that wise mind.
Sophia is going to share an example of one of the responses from her participants about the root causes, the reasons why we're seeing some of the strengths and concerns that came up in our photos and captions.
Well, I immediately think of the pandemic because we're still not fully out of it, although it does feel that way sometimes, but then other times it feels like we're not at all. Just from the discussions we've been having, seeing a lot of these empty spaces and not having as many activities as we once did on campus or in general, where we could spend time with one another. And then on top of that, all of the horrible things that have been happening in the country. And then also here in our own state with the legislation, and everything is just an obstacle after we get hit with this horrible pandemic. And it's just causing a lot of these feelings of isolation and lack of connection and stress and depression and anxiety and just everything. And then even looking at our education, we're not formally taught before college or even during college about self-care routines, how to cope with anything in life. That's just not taught unless you go out of your way to look up YouTube videos or things online. But like from our formal education, we're not sat down and taught these skills that you absolutely need. There's so many reasons, but there's even smaller reasons that feed into the big reason of why we're feeling this way. It all stems down to the root cause, which is just this lack of connection through our education system, through others, employees, coworkers, families, students, and everything.
During our conversations, the last prompt that we discussed is, given everything that we've learned from our photos and our captions and this rich conversation, what can we do and who needs to be at the table to make that kind of change? So Kalia is going to share an example of what her participants had to say in response to this question.
I think when it comes to counseling, a clinical setting is not ideal because people can feel they're being pushed in and out really quickly. Mental illness is different from physical illness. We think that the concentration on personal relationship with people should be more emphasized. One thing I would like to suggest is more group therapy and group counseling. I could go to AA, I could go to Narcotics Anonymous, I could do all that stuff, but I am going to be surrounded by people who are much older than me, where I'm not going to be comfortable. Trying to find a group of our age is really difficult. So we would like to see some group therapy through the USF Counseling Center. Could there be a person or a group to support students with their paperwork to start receiving services at the counseling center? I'm just thinking from a student perspective. If I have a lot of paperwork and I'm struggling, then I would probably want to have someone to support me. It could be a student or someone who comes in from the same peer group. I think that could be helpful.
Great. Thank you so much, Kalia. I love that idea of the system navigator, the intake coordinator peer at the counseling center to help with the paperwork pieces for someone, especially who might be in crisis. Sophia, could you share what your participants had to say, an example of what they had to say in response to the question of what can we do and who needs to be at the table to address some of the issues we've learned about?
Yes, so everyone should have a voice at the table. The work has to be done by the people in power, though. Stop exploiting people at the bottom, vulnerable people, to do the work or change. We should be a supportive community that shows it cares by funding mental health resources. How can people take advantage of resources if they don't know about them? Instructors feel a big disconnect not knowing the resources on campus. A reason may be because searching for and retaining more information is a lot to handle on top of work, such as grading and research at the university, personal projects, or other things like that. Entering college is such a brand new experience in one's life. It is important to have areas to connect because major life changes can be isolating. These feelings of isolation can contribute to stress, depression, and overall anxiety.
During the photo discussion sessions, research analysts from the Voices of Behavioral Health Lab, like Kalia and Sophia, used the template that you see here on the screen to take notes on the photo discussion. So what they did was use this socio-ecological model illustrated here and categorize the notes they took on the discussion from what the participants had to say along the 5 levels of the socio-ecological model as the row, And then as the columns, they organize those notes in terms of what helps and what gets in the way. So the socio-ecological model tells us in public health research and practice about the different levels of influence on behaviors and patterns in society that lead to different kinds of health outcomes. So we can think about these factors on the individual level, and the notes were categorized at the individual level when Sophia and Kalia and the research analysts heard participants talking about personal level knowledge, attitudes, skills, and behavior. The notes were categorized as interpersonal when participants were discussing personal and professional or school relationships and relationship dynamics. They were categorized as organizational when participants discussed issues specific to one organization. So for example, law enforcement or the school system. And then at the community level, when participants were discussing interactions between organizations, for example, how schools relate to and work with law enforcement, as well as any social norms and values that shape our organizational and interpersonal interactions. And that final level of the socio-ecological model is policy influences. So we coded the notes in this area when participants were discussing laws and regulations, as well as government funding and use of resources. So as you can see here, we presented these notes to participants at the following session after their photo discussion so that they were able to reflect on what they had talked about and make any changes to correct the notes and make sure they were accurate representations of what they'd said in their previous conversation. As you see here, in addition to the grid, the research analysts also captured any other notes from the conversation that they thought were important and key quotes and phrases, followed by a summary of how participants answered the question, what can we do and who should be involved, to help inform the final analysis and action planning stage of the process. So in the analysis and action planning stage of the process, participants reviewed all of the different photos that they had taken and had access to all of the notes documents that they had reviewed in previous sessions. From the notes documents, they went through and wrote finalized captions for each of the photos that they had taken, deciding on what combination of quotes and additional information from the notes documents they wanted to include in order to make the points that they thought were most important for our campus decision makers and viewers of this documentary to hear. So the notes documents really became a tool for participatory analysis during that final the session. So what you're going to see next is some of the footage from the actual live show exhibiting the Photovoice products, hearing from some more of the folks involved with the project, and then also seeing a slideshow of all of the photo and quote combinations with postcard designs that were distributed at the live event.
Hi, I'm Anisha Gurdwal. I'm a freshman here in College of Public Health. I'm working as a graphic designer in Voices of Behavioral Health Lab. I have designed a few flyers and poster templates like this for our project. It was such a wonderful experience to be part of this team, getting to know stories from different people, and I'm so glad to be part of this team. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Minyu Fan, and I'm a graphic designer and analyst for Voices of Behavioral Health Lab. During This Is My Brave, my responsibility is taking notes, and I review transcript to remove personal names during the sessions. These are my old takeaways from our 3 sessions. So like most of the participants study online and they barely have the opportunity to engage in on-campus counseling, but from their perspectives and from all the hearings that they receive from their co-workers or friends on campus, they have listed so many suggestions and advice for USF, well, not only USF, but all other campuses in the state to improve their counseling centers and through that improve the mental health of college students.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jamie Clem. I am a faculty member in the School of Social Work here at USF, and I am a faculty participant in the Photovoice project. I took photos, first I participated in a focus group where we talked about different obstacles to mental health care as a student perspective and then also from the faculty and staff perspective. Then from there, I took photos that represented either strengths, things that kind of support mental health, or obstacles, things that kind of got in the way of my personal mental health journey through being an academic in here at USF. When I heard about the opportunity, I felt really connected to the mission. I've struggled with depression and anxiety for my entire life. When I was in college, it was kind of at its worst, and I had a hard time finding the resources that I needed. I went to a large university in Florida, and it's harder to access counseling services and to find people who can really support you than you would sort of imagine. And I've noticed that as a faculty, I really had to kind of stay on top of my own mental health if I wanted to be able to be kind of the best that I can be. The two photos that I have here, the first one is of someone taking a nice nap here on campus. Both of them kind of represent this perspective of social justice and having maybe systemic obstacles or systemic oppression being something that weighs really heavy on our mental health. I was actually just talking to a student today who has been struggling with their work because they're experiencing so much trauma from kind of the politics that are going on. This particular student identifies as transgender. And with the Florida legislation being in session right now, the student wakes up every day and checks kind of the legislative summary from the night before to see if any laws that have been passed that could potentially criminalize their existence. So I really wanted to represent kind of those diverse voices of students and faculty who have been really impacted by Florida politics, particularly oppressive legislation and rules and politics that have made it really difficult for people to just express who they are and be comfortable with their lived experiences.
Hello, so my name is Valentina Arcila. I actually am a USF alumni. I graduated last spring, May 2022, with my bachelor's in behavioral health care with a concentration in adult community services and a minor in sociology. Now I actually currently work at USF in the mental health law and policy department, and I work basically behind the scenes in the same major that I graduated from. So I learned about Photovoice because I work alongside one of the facilitators of the research project, and it's a topic that I'm very passionate about, which is mental health, and especially mental health stigma. So that's how I got involved with Photovoice. I thought it was a great opportunity to share pictures and kind of tell stories about my mental health journey in a way that I felt was more palatable and really easy to explain to others, especially through pictures. So here I have one of my images of a bald eagle, and I titled it "Free to Fly," and the quote reads, "How can we fly if our freedom is being threatened in a cage where we cannot spread our wings?" So this really stood out to me because of just our current political climate here in Florida with everything going on. And not only that, but even just thinking of the struggles that students face when they're in college. And now that I am here as staff here at USF, I get to kind of experience USF in a different perspective, but I'm still seeing very similar patterns from what I experienced as a student. And so with this image of this bald eagle inside this cage, I just thought that it was just very telling of seeing this image of freedom that we have in our country, and it's just surrounded by this cage, not able to fly away or explore or just go and enjoy the space around them. And so that's what made me really want to include this image part of Photovoice, because just looking at it, it just made me feel very emotional just with everything going on in our climate today. And so I thought that others could relate to it and also look at it and see the meaning that I have put onto it. So joining the Photovoice was honestly a really great opportunity for me to really connect with others. I joined USF as a student right when the pandemic hit, so I transferred here in spring 2020. So throughout my whole bachelor's, I experienced my degree fully online, and prior to that, I was not an online student at all. So I went through times of feelings of isolation and just not feeling like I was really part of a community, although I know that there's such a rich community here at USF, but with the pandemic, it just kind of threw everything out the window. And so now that we're kind of somewhat on the other side of things, I'm now here experiencing USF on a different perspective now that I work here. And in a way, I'm kind of experiencing the college life that I didn't really get through my degree. And I mention this just because of Photovoice, I was able to connect with others that have experienced a lot of the same things I have, especially seeing images. Not even getting the context behind the images, but just seeing them, I can see why they included this image, and I can see how it relates to just mental health, whether it's our mental health in a positive standpoint or in a negative, talking about the struggles that we have gone through. And so being able to share our stories in a way that I think anyone can really experience by looking at an image and putting on these definitions and meanings to it, I think is a really great way to like connect with others and to be able to relate with one another and really start conversations that otherwise we probably wouldn't have.
Hi, my name is Sofia Reyes Ochoa, and I'm really excited to be participating in Photovoice for the Brave Takes. I wanted to talk about the specific group that I was working with. This is an example of what Photovoice is. These are the pictures that the participants took. And then on the side we have the captions of what they were talking about. And I thought it was very interesting because here we have a picture of a sanctuary, of an animal sanctuary. And on this area we have a picture of a area on campus surrounded by nature, and further back you can see water. There's just a bunch of trees, and the major concept of this poster is being able to reconnect with nature and with our surroundings and taking time to really soak up our environment instead of being either glued to our phones or being extremely anxious about the future or regretful of the past. And they were talking about being super grounded in the present, which is something that is really easily found when you take the time to step aside and reconnect with the natural part about being a human and being a biological living animal.